Imagine an army where no soldier ever dies. 10,000 faceless shadows march toward you. You kill one. His body hasn't hit the ground before another identical warrior steps into his place. Same silver mask, same spear, same inhuman silence. You kill 10, 20, 100. The line never breaks. The number never changes. 10,000. Always 10,000. Your sword arm grows tired. Your courage falters. You begin to understand. You're not fighting men. You're fighting mathematics. You're fighting inevitability. You're fighting gods. This is the Persian Immortals. And their greatest weapon wasn't the spear. It was the mask that erased their humanity and replaced it with terror. The Palace of Susa. 510 BC. A massive frieze stretches across the palace wall. Glazed brick. Brilliant colors that haven't faded into 1,500 years. 10,000 soldiers march across it. Imperfect formation, identical, faceless, eternal. This is the visual propaganda of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. The image they wanted visitors to see. Ambassadors, tributary kings, anyone who thought about defying Persian authority. Look at what we command. 10,000 warriors who never tire, never fear, never die. It was brilliant psychological warfare. But here's the thing. It wasn't entirely fiction. The Persian Immortals called the Anesia in Old Persian were real. An elite unit of exactly 10,000 soldiers. The king's personal guard. The shock troops who broke enemy lines. The enforcers who suppressed rebellions. But they had a trick. A system so simple it seemed like magic. Immediate replacement. A soldier falls in battle is instantly pulled from formation. And before his absence can be noticed, another warrior steps into his place. No gap in the line. No reduction in numbers. 10,000 at dawn. 10,000 at dusk. Herodotus described this. He coined the term immortals because to outside observers, they appeared unkillable. Not because individual soldiers couldn't die, but because the unit never diminished. Mathematically perfect, psychologically devastating. Your enemy isn't just strong. He's infinite. He's inevitable. He's immortal. How do you fight that? How do you maintain morale? When killing the enemy doesn't reduce their numbers, you don't. You break. You run. You surrender, which was exactly the point. But the replacement system alone wasn't enough. Because even with perfect rotation, an army of men still looks human. You can see faces, read expressions, detect fear or fatigue. The Persians solved this problem with military psychology. The silver gilded mask. Not every Persian soldier wore one. Just the immortals, the elite guards standing closest to the king. The ones most visible to enemies and subjects alike. The masks were simple but transformative. Silver or bronze, covering most of the face. Eyes visible through slits. Mouth covered. Expression completely erased. You didn't see a person. You saw a surface, reflective, blank, inhuman. And when 10,000 of them stood in formation, when sunlight hit those silver faces and turned them into a wall of blinding light, terror. But the visual effect wasn't even the most unsettling part. It was the sound. 10,000 men breathing behind metal. The slight echo. The rhythmic intake and exhale multiplied, creating a low, droning hum that wasn't quite human. Add the synchronized footsteps. The march of 10,000 feet hitting the ground in unison, and you had a soundscape that bypassed rational thought and triggered primal fear. Not the sound of an army, something else, something vast, something implacable. The masks also had a practical advantage. They eliminated individuality. In most armies, soldiers are recognizable. You know faces. You fight alongside specific men. You notice when someone dies because you knew them as a person. But with the Immortals, every masked face looked identical. When one fell and another stepped forward, enemies couldn't tell the difference. The replacement was seamless, perfect. The mask erased the man and replaced him with the concept. Not a soldier, an immortal, part of an infinite, undying collective. It was the ancient world's equivalent of replacing individual soldiers with a military algorithm. Precise, efficient, terrifying. The genius of the masked immortal wasn't just visual. It was psychological warfare refined to an art form. Consider what happens in normal combat. You look at your enemy's face, you read fear, determination, exhaustion. You see humanity. That affects you, makes them real, makes killing them feel consequential. But the Immortals gave you nothing. Just silver, just reflection, just the sight of your own terrified face staring back. They didn't shout war cries, didn't boast, didn't taunt. They marched in silence, fought in silence, died in silence, and were replaced without acknowledgement. That silence was weaponized. Because humans are wired to respond to emotional cues, we negotiate, communicate, react to facial expressions. Strip that away, and something breaks in our psychological response. You're not fighting a person. You're fighting a mirror, a void, an absence where humanity should be. And that absence is more frightening than any battle cry. The masks also prevented fatigue detection. Normally, you can see when soldiers are exhausted. Their movements slow. Their expressions change. You know when to press the advantage. But masked immortals showed nothing. You couldn't tell, so you assumed the worst. That every masked face represented a fully rested warrior, even when it wasn't true. The perception alone was enough. This is advanced psychological warfare, not just defeating the enemy's body, defeating their mind, making victory seem impossible before the first blow is struck. The Persians understood something modern militaries still teach. Winning the psychological battle is more valuable than winning the physical one. Break their will, and you don't need to break their bodies. The Immortals' faceless, numberless, silent were designed specifically to break will. And they did. For 2 centuries, the sight of those silver masks sent shivers through the ancient world. But the masks weren't just tactical. They were theological. The Achaemenid Persians followed Zoroastrianism, a religion centered on cosmic dualism. Light versus darkness, order versus chaos, truth versus lies. The Persian king, the Shahanshah, King of Kings, represented our master's divine order on earth. His job wasn't just political, it was cosmic. He maintained truth, enforced order, pushed back chaos. And his army? They were instruments of that divine mission. The Immortals weren't just soldiers. They were manifestations of divine will. The king's personal connection to the celestial order. Their equipment reflected this. Not just functional, ritualistic, beautiful, silver-pommeled spears, wicker shields faced with leather or hide, elaborate tunics with geometric patterns, jewelry that marked rank and honor. They looked magnificent, not like barbarian hordes, like divine warriors, light incarnate, order made flesh, or rather order made silver, because the masks completed the transformation from man to archetype. Without faces, they weren't individuals with human flaws and limitations. They were avatars, representations of cosmic principle. When they stood before the king in formation, 10,000 identical silver faces reflecting light, they created a visual theology. The king at the center, divine, unique. The immortals surrounding him, infinite, identical, eternal. Together, they formed an image of perfect order, mathematical, unchanging, divine. This wasn't just military display. It was religious architecture, a statement about how the universe should function. Divine authority at the center, perfect obedience surrounding it. And anyone who saw that display, ally or enemy, understood the message. This is what divine right looks like. This is what cosmic order looks like. And you cannot defeat it. The Persian Immortals lasted as an institution for about 200 years, until Alexander the Great dismantled the Achaemenid Empire. But their influence didn't end. The concept of the elite faceless unit anonymous, uniform, psychologically overwhelmingly appears throughout military history. The Roman Praetorian Guard adopted similar tactics. Identical armor, synchronized movement, projection of imperial invincibility. Medieval European knights used heraldry and full helmets to create similar effects. You didn't fight a person, you fought a symbol, a coat of arms made steel. And in modern times, special forces units worldwide understand the psychological power of the masked operator. Balaclavas, face paint, uniforms that erase individuality. The message is the same. You're not facing men. You're facing a system, a force, an inevitability. The Persian Immortals invented this psychology 2,500 years ago, and we're still using it. But there's also a cinematic legacy. The Immortals appear in movies, books, video games, usually as mysterious, unstoppable antagonists, faceless enemies who represent overwhelming force. Often, these depictions aren't historically accurate. The real Immortals weren't superhuman. They were well-trained, well-equipped, and brilliantly deployed. But they were still mortal. Yet the legend persists, because the image is too powerful to forget. 10,000 silver masks, 10,000 faceless warriors, an army where no one dies because identity itself has been sacrificed. That image haunts us, fascinates us, terrifies us, because it represents something primal. The erasure of self in service to power, the transformation of individuals into instruments, the mask that strips away humanity and replaces it with function. The Persian Immortals proved that the most effective weapon isn't always the sharpest sword. Sometimes it's the mask that erases the face behind it. Because when you remove the face, you remove the person. And when you remove the person, you create something that can't be reasoned with, can't be intimidated, can't be defeated by killing individuals. You create a system, and systems don't die. They just replace their parts and march on. 10,000 strong. Always 10,000 strong. Forever. If you love stories of lost civilizations and underwater archaeology, like, share, and subscribe for more history that